I paid my sister's bills for 4 years, and then I found out that she and her fiancé had stolen my investments and laughed. Jake had been sending his sister, Emma, and her fiancé, Tyler, $900 every month for 4 long years. It wasn't a loan, nor was it a temporary favor. It became an obligation that drained him, consuming his life piece by piece. He justified it under the guise of family loyalty, convincing himself that he was doing the right thing. After all, family helps family. At first, Emma and Tyler were effusive with their gratitude, showering him with thank yous and promises that they would regain financial stability soon. But as the months turned into years, their words dulled, their appreciation faded, and Jake's sacrifices became an unspoken expectation rather than an act of generosity. Meanwhile, his own life suffered in ways he never could have imagined. His friends would plan vacations, weekend getaways, road trips, and even international excursions, but Jake could never join. He couldn't afford to. Every dollar he earned at his grueling welding job was earmarked for bills that weren't even his own. Nights out at restaurants? Impossible. Dating? Out of the question. He lived on cheap, processed food, ramen, canned beans, and whatever was on clearance at the grocery store. The irony was painful. While he kept Emma and Tyler afloat, he himself was sinking. The job itself was brutal. 10-hour shifts in the suffocating heat of a welding shop, his body perpetually sore, his hands calloused and burnt from the metalwork. Each paycheck was a reminder of how hard he worked, yet the moment it arrived in his account, nearly $1,000 would disappear. Gone. The money barely had time to settle before it was funneled into Emma and Tyler's mortgage, their groceries, their car payment. He told himself, month after month, that they just needed a little more time. That soon, they would figure things out. But soon never came. In the beginning, Emma would call him with teary gratitude, promising that she and Tyler were trying their best to get back on their feet. She would tell him about job interviews, about potential promotions, about the bad luck that kept them from standing on their own. Tyler would text him, bro-like and casual, throwing in the occasional "man, we really appreciate you," before quickly pivoting to another request. But over time, those messages became less apologetic and more expectant. No more explanations. No more reassurances. Just a simple, "Hey, could you send it early this month?" As if he were nothing more than an ATM with a welding mask. Jake began noticing the small things first. The way Emma and Tyler always seemed to have new clothes when he visited, the way their fridge was stocked with brand-name food while he was rationing peanut butter and bread. Their home, the one he was helping to keep, was well-furnished, comfortable. The latest gaming console sat next to their flat-screen TV. A subscription service he couldn't afford was queued up on their account. But they never mentioned getting jobs that could support this lifestyle. Never even hinted at a plan to stop taking his money. Still, he swallowed his pride. He convinced himself that maybe he was imagining it, that maybe they were just making different financial choices. That was, until one day, when he casually mentioned how tight things were for him. How he had been skipping meals to stretch his budget. How he was falling behind on his own bills because of what he was sending them. Emma's reaction? A sigh. An annoyed, almost put-out sigh. "Jake, we appreciate everything you've done," she said, her voice carrying that same patronizing tone he had begun to hate. "But, we really do need this money. You don't understand how hard it is for us." He sat there, stunned. He didn't understand? He, the one who had given up everything for them? The one who hadn't taken a single vacation, hadn't had a single luxury, hadn't been able to live his own life? Tyler, lounging on the couch, added with a chuckle, "Yeah, man. You don't have a mortgage. You don't have kids. You wouldn't get it." Jake had to bite his tongue to keep from exploding. He didn't have a mortgage because he couldn't afford one. He didn't have kids because he wasn't in a place to even consider starting a family. He was living paycheck to paycheck, but not because of personal failures, because he had spent the last 4 years funding theirs. And that was when he realized, they never intended to stop. There was no end date, no finish line, no moment where they would tell him, "We're good now, you can stop." This was permanent. He was their financial safety net, a never-ending source of money that they had grown entitled to. That night, he lay awake in his tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, the hum of his old refrigerator the only sound filling the space. His body ached from work, his stomach growled from skipping dinner, and all he could think about was how much he had lost. 4 years of his life, tens of thousands of dollars, and the respect of the people he had sacrificed it all for. He wasn't a brother to them. He was a resource, a convenience, a means to an end. And the worst part? They didn't even feel guilty about it. Jake sat at the dinner table, swirling the ice in his glass, his stomach churning with frustration. Emma and Tyler had just announced their wedding, and the room was filled with congratulations and excitement, until they turned to him. "We were hoping you could help out," Emma said, her voice saccharine, as if she wasn't about to ask him for more money. "You've always been there for us, Jake. It would mean so much." Jake blinked, barely able to process what he was hearing. Help out? Hadn't he been doing that already? For 4 years. "I can't," he said, his voice firmer than usual. "I'm already sending you guys $900 a month. That's more than enough." Emma's smile faltered. "Jake, it's our wedding. This is different." "Exactly," he replied, his jaw tightening. "It's different because it's a luxury. You don't need a wedding. You told me you were struggling to pay bills, remember? You told me you couldn't survive without my help. Now you're planning a wedding." Emma gasped, as if he had slapped her. "How could you say that?" she whispered, eyes darting around the table for support. "You know we've been going through a rough time." Tyler, who had been sitting back in his chair, finally spoke. "Come on, man. It's not like we're asking for much." Jake scoffed. Not much? He had spent years eating instant noodles and skipping meals to support them. He had put his own life on hold, his own dreams buried under the weight of their problems. And now, they wanted more? "I'm sorry, but no," he said, pushing his chair back. "I can't afford to fund your wedding." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Emma's face twisted in hurt, but behind it, Jake saw something else, annoyance. Not disappointment that he couldn't help. Disappointment that he wouldn't. Tyler shook his head and let out a small, bitter laugh. "Guess family doesn't mean much anymore." Jake clenched his fists under the table. Family. That word had been used against him like a weapon for years. They moved on, ignoring him for the rest of the night, but the tension lingered. He could feel the weight of their disapproval, like he had failed them somehow. But that feeling evaporated the moment he saw them pull up at the next family gathering. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, the kind of day that should have lifted his mood. Instead, his stomach sank when he saw it, a brand new Jeep Cherokee, the sunlight glinting off the polished surface, tires so fresh they still had the factory markings on them. Jake stood frozen on the porch, watching as Emma stepped out, adjusting her sunglasses like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. She was laughing, twirling a strand of hair between her fingers, completely at ease. Tyler hopped out of the driver's seat, slamming the door shut with a self-satisfied grin. Jake felt like he had been punched in the gut. They were broke. They couldn't survive without his money. But they could afford a brand new car? He approached them as they walked toward the house. "Where'd that come from?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. Emma barely glanced at him. "Oh, it's just something we needed." The old car was falling apart. Tyler patted the Jeep like it was a loyal dog. "Got a great deal on it, man. Practically a steal." Jake's teeth clenched. A steal? They couldn't pay their own mortgage, but they could make car payments on this? And then he noticed something else. Emma's wrist, glinting in the sunlight. Expensive jewelry. A gold bracelet, delicate but undoubtedly costly. The kind of thing Jake had never seen on her before. "Nice bracelet," he said, folding his arms. "Didn't realize pawn shops sold designer jewelry." Emma's head snapped toward him, her expression shifting for just a second, before she let out a short laugh. "Oh, this? I found it at a pawn shop. It was such a good deal. Barely cost anything." She was lying. Jake knew it. The way her fingers fidgeted with the clasp, the slight hesitation before she answered. His stomach twisted. How long had they been lying to him? Dinner was a blur of forced conversation and fake smiles. Jake barely touched his plate, his appetite gone. And then, as he was refilling his drink in the kitchen, he heard it. Tyler's voice, coming from the next room, low but cocky. "Man, I made a killing on that investment. Didn't even have to put in that much, and the returns are insane." Jake froze, his grip tightening around the glass. "Yeah, it's all about knowing the right people. Gotta play it smart," Tyler continued. "Anyway, I'm thinking we go bigger next time. If we pool more money." Jake stepped into the room, and just like that, the conversation died. Tyler went silent, his body stiffening for a split second before he turned with a casual smile. "Hey Jake. What's up?" Jake looked between them, his pulse pounding. An investment deal. Tyler was making money. He had money. And yet, month after month, they had taken Jake's paycheck without hesitation. Let him struggle. Let him suffer. Lied to him. Emma cleared her throat. "We were just talking about some stuff Tyler's looking into." Jake exhaled slowly. "Right. Business stuff." Tyler nodded. "Yeah, you know how it is. Always trying to stay ahead." Jake swallowed the fury burning in his chest. Always trying to stay ahead. Like when they had asked him for wedding money, knowing they were about to drive away in a brand new car. Like when they had guilt him for not helping more, all while Tyler was making a killing on investments. Like when they had treated him like an obligation, an open wallet, rather than a brother. His hands shook as he set his drink down on the counter. The humiliation of it all sat like a weight on his chest. He had sacrificed so much for them, and they hadn't even respected him enough to hide their greed. They didn't even care if he found out. And for the first time in years, he felt something new, something sharper than anger, heavier than disappointment. He was done. Jake sat in his small apartment, the dim glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His mind raced as he thought about everything he had seen at the family gathering, the Jeep, Emma's jewelry, Tyler's investment talk. Something wasn't adding up. If they were still struggling, where was all this money coming from? He opened his bank statements and scrolled through 4 years of payment. Over $43,000. That was how much he had sent them. Nearly half of what could have been a down payment on his own home. Money that had cost him his social life, his comfort, his future. And they had just kept taking, without a second thought. Something in him snapped. He wasn't going to let this go. Digging deeper, Jake started making calls. He reached out to some old mutual friends, trying to piece together a clearer picture of Emma and Tyler's finances. The first real clue came from one of Tyler's old coworkers. "Wait, you're telling me he's been borrowing money?" The guy had laughed over the phone. "Man, Tyler got a huge bonus months ago. 5 figures. He was bragging about it at work." Jake's stomach dropped. He swallowed hard and pressed for details. "How much are we talking?" "Dunno the exact number, but it was definitely over 20 grand. Maybe more." Jake gripped his phone tighter. 20 grand. Enough to wipe out most of their supposed financial struggles. Enough to stop taking his money. And yet, they had never said a word. They had let him keep sacrificing. Fury bubbled up inside him, but it wasn't just anger, it was humiliation. They had money this whole time. They never needed him. But that wasn't the worst of it. The real estate deal. A week later, Jake got another piece of the puzzle from his grandmother. He had casually mentioned something about Emma and Tyler's finances, hoping she might have insight. What she told him shattered everything. "Jake, honey, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you," she said softly. "But Emma and Tyler invested in that real estate deal Uncle Pete was offering a while back. I thought you knew." Jake felt the air leave his lungs. The real estate deal. It had been an opportunity Uncle Pete had mentioned to him over a year ago. A chance to get in on a rental property at a low cost, something he had dreamed about for years. "But I never invested," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandmother hesitated. "Emma told us you weren't interested. She said you were terrible with money and that you'd just waste the opportunity." Jake sat in stunned silence. She continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Pete was unsure at first, but Emma convinced him. She and Tyler took the spot instead." His vision blurred with rage. They stole his investment. They used his own money, the money he had been giving them out of kindness, to take the very opportunity he had been working toward. And the worst part? They told the family he was too irresponsible to handle it himself. Jake's hands shook as he processed what this meant. They had lied to him. They had stolen from him. And they had destroyed his reputation within the family to do it. The final betrayal. Jake needed to hear it for himself. He needed confirmation that this was real. That night, he called his grandmother again. "Grandma, did Emma and Tyler ever talk about me? About the money?" She sighed. "I don't want to upset you, sweetheart." "Please," he said. "I need to know." There was a long pause before she spoke again. They joke about it, Jake. They say you're their personal ATM." His throat tightened. "They laugh about how easy it is," she continued, pain in her voice. "They say that as long as they act broke, you'll keep paying." Jake squeezed his eyes shut. He had been a joke to them. They had mocked his kindness, treated him like a fool. All those nights he lay awake, worrying about whether they were okay, sacrificing his own well-being, his own future. They had been laughing behind his back. His own sister. His own blood. The breaking point. Jake sat in his apartment that night, staring at the wall. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands clenched into fists. They had taken everything from him. They had stolen his future, his dreams, his dignity. And now, he had to decide what to do next. Jake sat on his couch, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at Emma's contact. He had to do this. There was no going back now. He took a deep breath and pressed call. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice light, almost casual. "Hey Jake. What's up?" He didn't bother with pleasantries. "How long?" His voice was cold, steady. There was a brief pause. "What do you mean?" Jake clenched his jaw. How long have you and Tyler been lying to me? How long have you been using my money while telling everyone I'm bad with finances? The silence stretched between them. Then, she sighed. Jake, it's not like that. No. It's exactly like that, he snapped. You stole from me. You tricked the family into thinking I was irresponsible so you could take an investment that was meant for me. And the whole time, you were sitting there laughing about how easy it was to keep me paying. Another pause. Then, in a quieter voice, she said, We didn't steal from you, Jake. We just made use of the resources available to us. Jake's stomach turned. Resources? I was a resource to you. Emma exhaled, as if she were the one who had been wronged. Jake, you don't get it. You don't have a family to support. You don't have a mortgage. You don't. I don't have those things because I was paying for yours, he shouted. I ate garbage food, I worked overtime, I skipped out on having a life for years while you lied to me. And now I find out you've been sitting on a fat bonus and an investment deal that you stole from under me. Her voice hardened. We had to do what was best for us. Jake felt something inside him snap. The guilt, the sense of obligation, the years of being manipulated, it all vanished in an instant. You know what? His voice came out eerily calm. You're on your own now. Emma's breath caught. What? I'm done, he said. No more money. Ever. A beat of silence. Then, her voice turned sharp. Jake, don't be like this. We're family. No, Emma, he said, his tone cutting through the air like a knife. Family doesn't do what you did. And with that, he hung up. The begging, the silence in his apartment was deafening. For the first time in years, he felt free. Then, 2 days later, there was a knock at his door. Jake frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked over and looked through the peephole. Tyler. His hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Jake rolled his eyes and opened the door just a crack. What do you want? Tyler exhaled, shifting uncomfortably. Hey man. Look, I know you're mad, but can we talk? Jake didn't budge. Talk about what? Tyler swallowed hard. We hit a rough patch. Jake raised an eyebrow. Tyler forced a laugh. The real estate deal didn't work out. Market tanked and we didn't pull out in time. We lost almost everything. Jake tilted his head, feigning concern. That's rough. Maybe you should get a job. Tyler's face hardened for a second before he plastered on a fake, desperate smile. Come on, man. You know we wouldn't be asking if we weren't desperate. Oh, I know, Jake said. You only come to me when you need something. Tyler sighed. Look, I know we screwed up. I get it. But we're drowning here. We're behind on mortgage payments, the car. Jake let out a humorless laugh. The car? You mean the brand new Jeep Cherokee you pulled up in while telling me you couldn't afford food? Tyler's face turned red. We thought we'd have more time before I figured out what liars you were? Tyler clenched his jaw but quickly dropped the attitude. Look, I'll be honest. We messed up. We should have been upfront with you. But Emma's stressed and we need help, Jake. Please. Jake stared at him, unmoved. I just need a little help getting back on track, Tyler pleaded. You've always been there for us. Jake took a deep breath, then stepped back, and slammed the door in his face. The banging started almost immediately. Jake, come on. Just hear me out. Jake locked the door and walked away. Tyler shouted through the door for another few minutes before finally giving up. And just like that, Jake knew he was finally free. A new beginning. Days later, Jake got a call from Uncle Pete. Jake, his uncle said, his voice heavy with regret. I owe you an apology. Jake sighed. For what? For believing Emma, Pete admitted. She made it sound like you weren't interested, like you weren't responsible enough. I should have come to you directly. Jake was silent for a moment. I feel like I owe you, Pete continued. That's why I want to offer you a spot in a new investment deal. A better one. Jake's pulse quickened. What kind of deal? Similar setup, but with much higher returns, Pete explained. I already have a few people on board, but I saved a spot for you. If you want it. Jake didn't even hesitate. I want in. For years, he had been giving everything away. Now, he was finally investing in himself. He took his savings, pulled from his 401k and bought into the deal. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Jake was just getting home from work when his phone buzzed. He sighed, already knowing who it was before he even looked. Emma. Another voicemail. He had ignored the last few, but this time, something told him to listen, one last time. With a deep breath, he pressed play. Jake, please, Emma's voice was raw, thick with tears. I have nowhere to go. Tyler's gone, the house is being taken, and I don't know what to do. Mom and Dad can't help, and everyone else is turning their backs on me." She sobbed, a desperate, broken sound. "I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but Jake, I'm begging you. I don't even have a place to sleep tonight. Please, Jake didn't listen to the rest. He hit delete. No hesitation. No second thoughts. For years, he had given everything to Emma. He had been her safety net, her lifeline, her personal ATM. And she had laughed about it. She had treated his sacrifices like a joke, a guarantee, something she was entitled to. And now, the same person who had mocked him for being bad with money was homeless. He almost laughed at the irony. But there was no satisfaction in it. No anger left to feel. There was just nothing. Emma was just another mistake he was leaving behind. Mom's guilt trip. Of course, it didn't end there. A few days later, Jake's phone rang again. "Mom." He sighed. He knew exactly what this was about. Still, he answered. "Jake," she started, her voice already dripping with disapproval. "I just got off the phone with Emma." Jake leaned against the counter, rubbing his temple. "Yeah. She's homeless, Jake. Your sister. She has nothing. And you're really just going to what? Let that happen?" His grip on the phone tightened. "She's not my responsibility. She's your family." Jake let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, now we're talking about family?" "Jake," Mom sighed, the disappointment thick in her tone. "I raised you to be better than this. To take care of the people you love." Jake's stomach twisted, not because of guilt, but because he recognized this. This was the same manipulation he had fallen for before. He let out a slow breath. "You know what, Mom? You raised me to be a fool. You raised me to believe that I had to give everything just because someone shared my blood. And for years I let myself be used. I let Emma take from me while she laughed behind my back." Mom went quiet. Jake continued, his voice steady. "She chose this path. She lied. She stole from me. She threw me under the bus to get what she wanted. And now, she's paying the price." Mom inhaled sharply. "Jake, that's harsh." "No," he said, his voice like steel. "It's fair." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Mom spoke, quieter this time. "So that's it? You're just going to abandon her?" Jake's lips curled into a bitter smile. "No, Mom. She abandoned me a long time ago. I'm just finally done pretending otherwise." And then, for the first time in his life, he hung up first. Emma disappears. That was the last time Jake ever heard from Emma. No more voicemails. No more desperate texts. She was just gone. Part of him wondered what happened to her. Did she end up crashing on someone's couch? Living in her car? He didn't know. And he didn't care. Emma had made her choices. She had played the game, and she lost. Jake had finally stopped being her safety net. And for the first time in years, he could breathe. Jake's rise. Without Emma bleeding him dry, everything changed. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. His investment with Uncle Pete flourished, bringing in more wealth than he had ever imagined. The properties kept growing in value, and his bank account finally reflected what he had actually earned. At work, he got promoted twice. His boss had always liked him, but now that he wasn't constantly stressed about money, Jake was sharper, more focused. He finally had the mental space to put effort into himself. And for the first time in years, he started dating again. Her name was Alicia. Smart, funny, driven. She had no interest in his money, she had her own. And when he told her about everything he had been through, she just shook her head and said, "You deserve better." And for once, Jake actually believed it. The best part? Jake slept like a rock at night. No more lying awake, wondering how he was going to cover bills he didn't even owe. No more stomach-churning guilt over saying no. No more wondering when the next please, just one more month text was going to come. His home was his. His money was his. His life was his. And for the first time in a long, long time, he was free. Her name was Alicia. Smart, funny, driven. She had no interest in his money, she had her own. And when he told her about everything he had been through, she just shook her head and said, "You deserve better." And for once, Jake actually believed it. The best part? Jake slept like a rock at night. No more lying awake, wondering how he was going to cover bills he didn't even owe. No more stomach-churning guilt over saying no. No more wondering when the next please, just one more month text was going to come. His home was his. His money was his. His life was his. And for the first time in a long, long time, he was free.